Much like my caffeine addiction, League of Legends is incredibly healthy. It just makes me feel so warm inside when I queue up a game and a teammate starts intentionally throwing the match because something went slightly wrong. And since I've been playing League for 2 entire weeks, I think you have a pretty good reason to give me your watch time hours. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Sun Tzu. The problem with this quote in relation to League is most of the so-called human beings you'll be playing with are so delusional they barely count as people, and it's impossible to know what psychotic break they're about to have next. I always like to ask how everyone's day is going at the beginning of the match. This way, I know if anybody is gonna be a bit of an outlier, because much like a heroin addiction, it will literally only get worse as the game progresses. Alternatively, if your teammate says nothing or even interacts positively, this is a good sign and means they might not start having an episode halfway into the game. I used to think most of the people who complained about their League teammates were just trying to find some way to not blame themselves, like it is in most competitive games, but I've learned half the time it's not about the skill of your teammates, it's how fast they decide to start intentionally throwing, and that is not a joke. I would argue a good 25% of the teammates you get have the possibility of snapping and turning your game into a punishment for making the mistake of downloading League. As I'm sure you've guessed, toxicity in League is a little out of hand, and I feel like that's not a hot take because in other games it's just a few random people getting mad over nothing. But here, when people get mad at nothing, they also make sure to hold a class lecture on how the League community is toxic and the other person should learn to deal with it in the most difficult to read paragraph I've seen in my entire life. But at the risk of this video being entirely me whining and complaining about my teammates, I would now like to segue into whining and complaining about certain champions. Now, I'm sure some Yasuo players out there have good mental health and have an IQ higher than room temperature, but the rest of them are one step away from doing something I will regret. Unfortunately, when I'm not jungling, I'm playing Yone because I love it when my screen is on low saturation mode for the majority of the game. Yone has this free leave the fight ability that he can place and teleports back to after a certain amount of time. The problem with this is it enables some questionable gameplay decisions. Unfortunately, when I play Yone, I immediately lose object permanence, obtain short-term memory loss, and throw myself at the enemy team before dying and blaming it on my jungler. Just watch me absolutely skill diffing this enemy misfortune. This is why Yuumi is so skill based, which is a crazy thing to be saying considering I'm not the guy walking around doing damage, I'm the floating cat whose only purpose is to buff him from time to time. Yuumi is an extra special champion released by Riot for new players, and I guess they thought people who play the game professionally at the highest level were new because it was picked or banned in 95% of pro matches, and it won every single time it was picked. The fun thing about Yuumi is instead of moving around or using your basic attacks or even taking damage like some kind of plebeian, you just press W and let your teammate carry you around like a metaphoric and literal backpack. Just press E or Q once in a while if you feel like it and AFK your way to victory. Even better if you can manage to get more kills than the enemy ADC, mid lane, and top lane combined. Viego is incredibly unfair to play against, if the person on the other team hasn't had a surprise lobotomy, but unfortunately most of the people in my rank are as stupid as I am, so whenever I play against Viego, it's really just free wins. At first, I thought Viego would be fun, because he can copy other people's abilities, but when I had to start studying every champion I'm matched against like it'll help me get accepted into college, I realized he's only strong when you don't have a permanent IQ debuff like I do. So, there are currently 5 roles you can queue for in a game of League: top lane, mid lane, ADC and support who both go bottom lane, and jungler. But for now, we're gonna simplify down to laners and jungle. People say jungling is the most complicated role, and I'm sure it is if you have enough brain cells to be in a high rank, but down here in Elo Hell, where laners have to learn complicated stuff like trading properly or roaming at the right times, junglers get to turn a PvP game into a PvE game. You just have fun killing NPC camps for free gold, watch the map, and when someone in a lane does something diabolically stupid, you just scamper your way over for the free kill. After playing Draft Pick for a while and routinely have people in a plastic tier MMR be so serious about a casual game mode they take any mistake their teammates make as a personal offense, I expected Rank to be a scaled up version of this because there were actually stakes now, but since I'm in a low enough rank here, people actually have more to their lives than League and are actually pretty relaxed. My placement matches were a lot of fun and nobody called me any slurs, so everything was going better than expected. League is a pretty complicated game, which means people are constantly making mistakes, and that's okay, but when someone does something so stupid it labels them an elo terrorist, people get mad, which is at the very least expected, but when people start giving up after one mistake, we have a problem. Even though it's frustrating when bottom lane is going 3-12, it doesn't mean you have to start turning your match into a bad KDA competition like they kicked your dog in the head. Unfortunately, since Riot does barely anything about this, there's really nothing holding you back, so honestly, do whatever you want as long as you're not in my match while you're doing it. Please. League is a great game as long as you can deal with the tilted creatures who woke up on the evil side of the bed. Don't become an inter and remember to step outside a little because you could die any day now. Okay, bye.